So it's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker for today. The other keynote speaker who's coming is still en route. There was some plane issues. He'll be here a little bit later, and you'll get to hear from him tomorrow. But today's speaker, Dr. Hatcher, is Professor Emeritus at Indiana University, Purdue University of Indianapolis. That's a hard thing to say, so I'll just say IUPUI for the reference. She served there as Associate Professor of Philanthropic Studies and Executive Director of the Center for Service and Learning. The vision of that center was to transform universities and communities through educationally meaningful service. And it is a signature center on the campus, and IUPUI is routinely recognized for their work of community engagement. Dr. Hatcher's doctoral work involved the development of a construct and scale for the civic-minded professional, and led to the development of another construct and scale called the civic-minded graduate, which we will be borrowing and using in our own assessment of programming in this grant. Her research and scholarship focuses on civic learning outcomes in higher education, philanthropic motivations of professionals, the philosophy of John Dewey, and the role of higher education in civil society. She's published significantly throughout her career, collaborates on national projects such as the Carnegie Classification for Community Engagement and the Association of American Colleges and Universities. She continues to serve on the National Advisory Board of the Carnegie Classification for Community Engagement. She's published a lot, as evidenced by the 9,500 citations on Google Scholar that are there. I saw that last night and was impressed. And I first became familiar with her work as the grant team was invited to submit a full proposal to the John Templeton Foundation. And we started thinking seriously about our leading questions, our hypotheses, and what we wanted to try to achieve, and thinking about assessment. How do we assess these sorts of things? So we met with some teams around the country who are doing this kind of work. We met with a team at the University of Oklahoma's Institute for Human Flourishing. We met with Wake Forest Program on Leadership and Character. They were helpful meetings as we started to develop our assessment plan. But I think a big step forward happened when we happened upon the civic-minded graduate construct and scale, and started thinking seriously about the different domains within that construct and the ways in which they will help us assess civic outcomes within our own programming. So that was a huge step forward. And then when we reached out to Dr. Hatcher, she generously agreed to come and talk to us about community engaged teaching, service, and research, and we're excited to hear from her. So without further ado, let me turn the floor over to Dr. Hatcher to present her paper titled Developing Civic-Minded Graduates Through Community-Engaged Teaching, Research, and Service. Dr. Hatcher.
Good morning or afternoon. And it is actually a delight to be here. When I first got the email inquiring about my interest to come to Auburn, and I can say this authentically, I just got tears in my eyes, in the sense of one does work, we all do our work, and hope that at some point that work matters, and all of you are dedicating your life to your work and your professional identity, and with the hope that it gets replicated or advances research, advances our understanding of the current context in which we live. And so when the email came, it was like unbelievable opportunity that I could come to Montgomery for my first visit to Montgomery. Experience what your students can experience in their visits to places in Montgomery, perhaps for their first time, but to have a sense that somehow the work that we've done at IUPUI across the years, and it's been adapted by other universities, but there's something very special about having it be adapted here for this project at this point in time. So I really do have a sincerity about my appreciation, and thank you for recognizing the work. It's not just my work, it's our work, so I'll often use the word we. And it represents the work of about probably, goodness, well, we'll find out, 30 years, something like that, 25, 30 years. So I look forward to any questions that you might have. Probably those questions can come at the end, and share the ideas that we've explored through our university over time. So when I read the grant and talked with the team virtually, it's like there's so many parts of this that to me are very exciting. One of those, and I've just listed some of these, one of those is the place-based asset that you have in Montgomery. And yet I've challenged the team to start thinking right off the bat of how is it that another university can replicate what you all are going to be about doing here for the next 3 years? Because that's also what we want to keep in mind from the start, so that it is about Montgomery, and it is about your place, but it's really about how can another university in whatever discipline or another faculty member take what you've done here and replicate it. So always keep that in mind. But the rich heritage that you have here and the way that it's been intentionally interwoven into the grant, I think is very exciting. Another thing that I have, let's see, fourth point down, the social learning environments. Over time in our work at the Center for Service and Learning, what we discovered is that when you bring a group of faculty together on a consistent basis, whether it's called a community of practice, community of learning, faculty learning community, something happens there. And so these networks of faculty learning with one another, and that's how this whole entire grant seems to be designed over the next 3 summers. Those become very rich learning environments for faculty. And so the fact that you're also exploring this idea of bringing students into the communities of practice, I think is a very distinctive model, and how to attract and retain students in those kind of learning spaces. So that was something I was very attracted to. The other thing I'll say is the interaction with virtuous exemplars. That's, I think, narrative within the grant. One of the things I've become more aware of is it's really interaction with ordinary people as well. And so if we think of this grant as facilitating a lot of conversation among students, with other community members, with other NGO partners, with their faculty. I mean, even for students to have conversations with you in and out of the classroom becomes educationally meaningful. And so this idea of storytelling and story sharing, I think, has rich potential within this grant. The other thing that I keep wanting to reiterate, and I would challenge you as well, is around the scholarship, to be thinking of this as an opportunity for scholarship on teaching and learning, because really this is a huge petri dish, I'll say, where it's a huge, rich network of opportunity of unanswered questions for each of you to explore. It is a grant that's built off of high-impact practices. George Koo and his work on high-impact practices in higher education. When we first saw his work, we were excited for the fact that service learning is designated, and all the work that Ashley Finley's done at AAC&U to understand the power of high-impact practices for students, particularly first-generation students and underrepresented students. Any type of high-impact practice tends to support learning and tends to support retention in the class over time. So service learning is one of those. Undergraduate research, lots of different types of high-impact practices exist. But this idea through this grant of having these opportunities for interaction with one another, having opportunities for structured reflection, keep in mind or state in your own, if you choose to participate, state in your own narrative for promotion and tenure that what you're doing is you're embracing high impact teaching, which we know has influence on students and student retention and persistence in higher education. When we describe community engagement at IUPUI, this is the Carnegie Foundation. When Carnegie, I was a part of that group that defined community engagement in 2006 for Carnegie. And what Carnegie's goal is to have a large umbrella so all institutional types can see themselves under this umbrella of community engagement. So this is a pretty long-standing definition of community engagement that the Carnegie classification uses. The one thing that I would point out is that it does include, as the Chancellor said, local, regional, state, national, and global. So it's not simply local. It does extend a wide umbrella for engagement. But the key part, I think, of this is for the mutual beneficial exchange of knowledge and resources in a context of partnership and reciprocity. It was helpful to us on our campus when we started changing the words in and with from to and for. Universities have often done work to communities, for communities. What happens when we change those small words to say, how can we do work with community? And that with, in and with the community, I think is what you start to get a picture of when you're talking about community engaged work rather than community-based work. Now, some of these are nuances, but as we've learned in higher ed, unless we're very explicit about what we mean on terms, there can be continued confusion about what it is that we're talking about. Carnegie Framework, and again, this is an elective classification that campuses can go through. I share this more because it gives you a sense of what nationally is understood around this particular term. And the Carnegie classification is interested in curricular engagement, and they're also interested in outreach and partnerships. With the curricular engagement, one of the realities that we've seen is that it's universities that are dedicated to the role of faculty and instructors and supporting the role of faculty and instructors to really change the curriculum, that is what endures across time in terms of making a difference in the university culture for engagement. It's very common that it would be in mission statements, and yet Carnegie is much more interested in does it appear in promotion or tenure and promotion guidelines? Does it appear in faculty searches? Is the campus known for attracting faculty who are, I'll say, civic-minded professionals who are interested in integrating this work into their teaching, research, or service across time? That, too, is what Carnegie's interested in. They're interested in definitions, and so we've talked with the group about this, that there may be an opportunity for your campus to become more certain of what you mean by these various words over time. Also, they are interested in outreach and partnerships, and so it's not just identifying those key partners, like the ones that you'll have a chance to visit, but it's also they've actually now started getting feedback from those partners on to what degree has this partnership been mutually beneficial, to what degree are community partners actually involved, rather than the university I won't say simply, because outreach still is an important role, an important public purpose of the university, but the Carnegie is very much more interested in how is it that partnerships, rather than placements, can endure over time. And again, that's a word that we make a distinction of in our work. So this is a Venn diagram that I don't think all the colors, so the colors didn't come through, and I'm sorry about that. But what you can imagine is there are 3 circles down here on across teaching, research, and service. And so on this diagram, and it may show up better when you get the presentation, the idea behind community engagement is that it can happen across all domains of your work. And so whether that is through teaching, whether it's through research or service, it is engagement that happens in lots of different ways. Now, at your campus, I see that, in what I've learned, at Montgomery, or at Auburn University at Montgomery, you have, from at least what I've heard, community-based learning. You have a lot of experiential, clinical, and internships, and like all universities do. You have community-based research projects. And the ones that I want to give heightened preference to in this talk would be what I'd call community-engaged learning experiences, or community-engaged professional outreach, and community-engaged research. And so to what extent might we consider how the first-year seminars are changed and modified, or the service learning classes? In the grant, you talk about civic virtue circles, and how is it that those kind of teaching activities can become deeper and more, I'll say, refined, or more targeted, or more intentional around civic-minded and civic virtue outcomes for both students and for you as the faculty member. Also, professional service and outreach and community outreach can be done in and with the community in new and important ways. And again, I think that the community of practice that will be developed would fall nicely in that category. The community-engaged research, I was interested to read about the new mayor, or Mayor Reed's Montgomery United Policy Research, and read that report, and just, for me in this work over time, it's like seeing all the various opportunities that exist for faculty to come into that, the goals of that report, to be able to start doing either research or involving undergraduates in undergraduate research that's tied to this initiative. But the fact that they had such a community voice initiative go into that report over time, to me, seems like that's also another key asset that you have going for you. If I was to describe the philosophical backbone to the work that I've done, and that's informed a lot of the work at the Office of Service Learning, it would have to do with both my master's degree in college student personnel, and then my PhD is in philanthropic studies. And oftentimes people, when I say philanthropic studies, oftentimes people think of fundraising. I know very little about fundraising. What I'm more interested in is the understanding of philanthropy in a liberal democracy. Why do we have so much philanthropy? What's the role of a civil society? What's the role of philanthropy across time in terms of social action and change. And so the folks that I've been highly influenced by would be Jane Addams, if you're familiar with her work at the late 1800s in Chicago. I was thrilled when I found out that actually Jane Addams invited John Dewey to Hull House, and John Dewey was a lecturer in Hull House, and that if I had another dissertation, which I don't, that would be around what was the influence of Jane Addams on John Dewey, because we don't ever really unpack that one, or I haven't seen that one unpacked. But again, I'll say to go to Hull House is a bit like going to the Freedom Writers Museum that I went to yesterday with Aaron, where you are face to face with the change that was able to occur in that place at that time. And the work of Jane Addams has been very inspirational to me. It's also been very inspirational to a team of folks from University of Pennsylvania, and their work is work that I'd highly recommend, and that's the work of Ira Harkavy and his colleagues, where they would argue that Jane Addams is the bedrock of service learning in higher education, given her partnership with the University of Chicago at the turn of the century. Ann Colby has written quite a bit as a developmental psychologist on civic identity development. Number of publications. John Dewey. I'm a big fan of John Dewey, especially around the value of experience and what one does with experiences, how one processes experience to create new knowledge for new action. Just on the way down here, I grabbed a small little book I brought and reread some Dewey. It's been a while. I don't think of Dewey all that often anymore, but just being reminded that what Dewey was most concerned about were the type of experiences that continue to cause us to take new action, to continue to cause us to be curious and inquire about new solutions to the problems that we daily encounter. David Kolb then adapted that work, I'd say, around the experiential learning model, and I'll have that to share in a minute. Donald Schoen as well took that same concept and construct about reflective practice in terms of professional life, and anytime we're putting together our narrative for promotion and tenure each year or the annual report, it's a reflective process. It's a structured, critical reflection on what we've achieved and what we plan to achieve in the future, and here's the evidence, and here's my continued question. So it is, as faculty, we just constantly are doing reflective practice about our own work and making that explicit to others. But Donald Schoen was an inspiration. But it's really William Sullivan's work that changed my understanding of what matters. What matters. And it was in a philosophy and philanthropy course that I ran into William Sullivan's work. I think I brought it with me, I'm not sure. There's a couple of references I can give you of the work that he has done. But William Sullivan has been with the Carnegie Foundation, and he's now with another organization, but he was chiefly interested in this concept of civic-minded professional. It's a word that Dewey used, but William Sullivan, I would say, sort of elevated it as he was talking about professionals. And so I was able to meet with him, and I said, really, here's what I plan to do. I want to create a scale that measures civic-minded professional, and this is in the Carnegie offices in California, and I remember he said, "You really want to do something practical with my work?" And I said, yes. So I came back to the office at the time, and I said to Bob, I think this is what this would have been in like the doesn't matter, 1998, I'm going to guess, 1999, and I said, I think this is what we're about. I think that really with service learning, with civic engagement, what we are about is supporting the continual development of civic-minded professionals. And so what I'd say to each of you, the fact that you are here today, the fact that you are choosing to be here on a rainy Thursday at the beginning of the semester gives me some pretty good guessing that you already are a civic-minded professional. And then what this project will likely do is continue to connect you with other civic-minded professionals who are interested in being a social trustee of knowledge, public regarding ends in a public regarding way. And to become a professional is not only to take up an occupation, it is to assume a civic as well as economic identity. So that with William Sullivan's work, and again, just imagine these circles, it didn't all come out. It's the idea that a civic-minded professional is one who sees their identity, and they see their identity as work, with work, but it also has a civic purpose to it, and it also has a public purpose to it. And so the civic-minded professional is one who works in a particular way to get this, to have their work matter in a public setting. So when we came back in our Center for Service and Learning, and I won't go into all of this, just a couple of things. In 1993, when it started, we were primarily an office that supported service learning course design. And we grew and morphed to become much more than that over time. So it became curricular and co-curricular, and really much more around faculty identity and faculty work as civic-minded professionals. One of the things that I wanted to draw your attention to, if it is a possibility here, I mentioned it last night at dinner. When I came back from the School of Philanthropy, I was on their faculty, and then I came back to the Center for Service and Learning. And when I came back, I realized that really one of the key engines behind our work in the Center for Service and Learning was an important decision that was made around service-based scholarships. On our campus, we call it the Sam Jones Community Service Scholarship Program. Sam Jones was a leader at the Urban League in Indianapolis for more than 20 years and a key partner with the campus. What our provost did at that time was to make a decision. We give athletic scholarships in higher ed. We give merit scholarships in higher ed. If IUPUI is serious about civic community engaged work, we need to be attracting students who have already a track record in service engagement, and keep them involved during the college years, because at that point what we were seeing from research is a higher number of people were reporting service engagement as freshmen than they did as seniors, because it would sort of drop off during the college years. And so Bill Plater and our center started this idea of service-based scholarship funds. What's important about that, I think, is that it is not just for college students themselves, it's for their, active participation, working sometimes in clubs, working sometimes as Bonner Scholars, working most importantly, I think, as a model perhaps for you all to look at alongside faculty as, we used to call it service learning associates. Now I think it's called civic engagement associates. On our website you could find more. But you as a faculty member could have a civic engagement associate to help you on any one of those kind of activities, as long as it's across teaching, research, or service, and it is community engaged, not just community based. So that these community engaged associates give you an extra set of hands to do the research, to conduct the interviews, to supervise, whatever it is. So that entire model I would just put forth as a perhaps it could happen here, whether it starts through this grant or if there's some campus money where that could be designated. So we've done lots of different things, and I just wanted to give you the sense of time where this hasn't happened overnight. It's definitely happened over time. And so when I learned about civic-minded professional, I came back and I said, I think this is what we're after, but how do we scale that down? College students aren't able to talk about their career yet. They're not talking about work. What are they talking about? They're talking about their identity toward which they will make their career and major choices. So we started using this concept of educationally meaningful service. What does that mean? How does that fit across our programs? And that's when we came up with the term of civic-minded graduate. Let's see, sorry. I'm gonna go to here and I'm gonna come back to those other things in a minute. So civic-minded graduate, we defined it in a similar way as civic-minded professional. Civic-mindedness is a person's inclination or disposition to be knowledgeable of and involved in the community, and to have a commitment to act upon that sense of responsibility as a member of that community. I remember early on someone asked me, when you say civic-minded, does that mean the person's only thinking about it? And so I always want to put forward this definition around civic-mindedness, that it really does involve action, not just thinking about something. So this concept of civic-mindedness is what we came to become our North Star. And again, sort of an overlap with my philanthropy, I had attended a workshop for nonprofit leaders, and the speaker was talking about a North Star, that a nonprofit needs to always have their North Star, and that North Star helps you to make your choices based on limited resources. So it helps you to know when to say yes and when to say no to opportunities. And so, again, coming back to our center and said to Bob, I really think CMG is our North Star. I think from all of our programming, all of what we're trying to do, because that is one thing that can easily happen around engagement. You're trying to do all these different things, and how do you pull it together in order to know what progress you're making and to what end? So the to what end was our answer to that. Let me also say that with this construct of civic-minded graduate, your campus is welcome to take any part of that that's helpful to you, adapt it to your to your context, so that it's very adaptable to different universities. So the idea of a civic-minded graduate as a North Star, we said, is one who is formally educated and has the capacity and orientation to work with others in a democratic way. And that particular dimension is critical to improve the community. So that our definition of civic-minded graduate is one that is informed quite a bit of what we have done over time. Let me flip back now to this definition of service learning. So we've got civic-minded professional, we've got civic-minded graduate, and then it becomes how, what's the means by which to create these outcomes. I think I would still argue that service learning, and I said to the team today, if I was back at IUPUI, I probably would start advocating for the term community engaged learning rather than service learning. We've used it across time, and yet I think that the word service learning has some very significant problems with that term and student understanding of that. So it'll be up to, I mean, I know that maybe in the grant proposal itself you use the word community engaged learning, and I think there's really much more value, but I wanted to share that this is our long-standing definition of service learning that others have rightly critiqued for various reasons, and yet wanted to share it. The part that I think is important, so service learning is defined as a course-based, because on our campus there were lots of things going on. Some are courses, some are clubs, some are community work study. So so over time, everyone's known, if you use the word service learning, you're talking about a course. That was in our definition, and that's how we sort of separate it. It's you participate in an organized service service activity, and that part has been modified over time. It's really a community a community organized need. But part B, reflect on the service activity in such a way as to gain a further understanding of course content, a broader appreciation of the discipline, and an enhanced sense of personal values and civic responsibilities. That's where this definition currently stands. I think even, again, this causing, I'll say now in 2022, I think that B can be improved upon. But this is what we've worked with over time. The one part about this definition that I want to highlight is, and I think that we've never really highlighted this in our own writing, but it really harkens back to the work of Dewey, harkens back to the work of William Sullivan, and it is the second bullet point, a broader appreciation of the discipline. And so as faculty and instructors in your own preparation to get to this point in higher ed, most of us have a particular discipline that has really framed us. Is it journalism? Is it geography? Is it Spanish? Is it mathematics? And then when it becomes, I think, our key responsibility as professionals, our key responsibility as civic-minded professionals is to really, I'm going to say, unearth what is the public purpose of our discipline? What's the public purpose of engineering? What's the public purpose of, it matters not, what's the public purpose of dance? Part of my role over time in working with faculty is to watch the moral imagination that you can bring to the table around the discipline that you have studied your entire life and bring that to bear on students. So that part of what we often will challenge students to think about is we would challenge them to reflect, and the reflection, I will say, is a common denominator between both probably what I'm sharing today and what the guest speaker will share tomorrow around how virtues are developed, because that reflection, it's not a soft word. People tend to think of it as a soft word. There's, analysis, critical reflection. It's a definite process that you would integrate within your course, within the club that you're within, the civic virtue circles. What is the pattern? What's going to be the habit of reflection that generates learning? Part of, and so it's understanding the course content. But my hope is that students leave with a major in history, from, I'll say, IUPUI, or I'll say from Auburn University at Montgomery, they leave with a major in history or journalism or informatics. And from their experiences at our universities, they leave with a better understanding of how that discipline matters. Because all disciplines do matter, and I think, you know, one of my undone things among many, early COVID, I thought, oh my gosh, COVID is the best example for how all disciplines matter. We could be so elevating students' understanding of civic-mindedness by having each of them in their disciplines understand and problematize how all disciplines matter. So that is the second bullet point down is one that I think deserves to be highlighted in the definition that we haven't always done, and an enhanced sense of personal values and civic responsibility. And if I were editing this at this point, what I'd also add is a stronger understanding of community conditions and long-time inequities that have existed, so that we're needing to unpack those far more explicitly than when we would have done what we were thinking in 2009. And so there's room for editing, feel free, to this definition. Wanted to put forward as well the work of Tania Mitchell. And Tania Mitchell in 2008 would have written her first piece on critical service learning. And I think that that also is important to keep in mind at this point. And so what she's done in this diagram is compared traditional service learning with what she uses the term as critical service learning. So traditionally, and this is back in the 90s when we were first starting, it was much more around student development. It was much more about me as an individual. It was the very beginning of programs like AmeriCorps, where I remember when we were first designing, it's when the legislation came through from the Carter administration about AmeriCorps. That's about individual service. And we've moved so far beyond that, and I think what Tania Mitchell and others have done is to take this beyond the individual to more the ideals of social justice and the ideals of how is it that engagement can produce change over time in and with communities. And so this may be also a helpful tool to keep in mind. And then that's what also, you see this in things like the Bonner program, where college students are learning much more about social change orientation, the social change model, understanding how that they can be significant actors in the community, working around redistribution of power and authentic relationships. So each of those, I'll say, domains in the critical service learning model, each of those has been highlighted all the more in literature over time. So some of what we have in the civic-minded graduate model, you may want to add to or add some items to better reflect, I think, what we know is good practice in community-engaged learning at this point. So again, I'm apologize for some reason some of these visuals didn't come through. Kristen Norris was keenly interested in she was a grad student doing her PhD with us. And she said, okay, you have these diagrams, you have these circles that overlap, and you say that in the middle is civic-minded graduate. And she kept pressing us, what pushes them together? You know, like, what is it about these, and how do you push these circles together? And so there are 4 in the actual presentation that you'll see. Some of the things that we know that push them together are what we called, or she called in her dissertation, civic mentors. And so you as faculty can, whether it's civic-minded professionals that you see yourself, or might you see yourself in her term as a civic mentor, that you are a role model and that you are continually putting forth the questions to students around the public purposes of these actions. So one of the arrows you would see on here would be civic mentors. Another one is dialogue across difference. What we've learned through research is when students are engaged in dialogue with those whom they perceive as being different than they are, that is a key. When we did research, Cheryl Keene and I and others did a research study on civic-minded professionals in the graduate years, and the question that kept the item number 24 was about dialogue across difference. That was the one that seemed to hold the most effect on students' civic-minded development. And so I present that as a challenge to invite you to constantly be considering how is it that in your class, in your society, in your club, however you're interacting with students and others, how do you facilitate that at the site? When students are involved with others at the community site. That seems to be one of the key dimensions that pushes these things together. The number of service learning classes on our campus pushes these circles together and increases civic-mindedness. And there's a fourth arrow that I'm not remembering now, but it'll be in the presentation. Oh, well, there you go. Bing, 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 bing. It's structured reflection. Yeah, great. So the civic-minded graduate tools, there are many. They are all very much available. The team has been in contact with, and can continue to be in contact with Tom Hahn. So we have a scale, we have an interview protocol, we have a narrative prompt, because our chancellor just challenged us early on and saying, Bob, so what if we had every graduate from IUPUI write a narrative prompt at the end of their graduation? Could you do that and use that as evidence of civic-mindedness? So we have that as a tool that can be used. We have a CMG rubric that can be adapted. And then the one tool to consider, and again, Kristen Norris did a lot of this work, but is around digital stories. And I do think that that might be a way for you to capture some of the student learning outcomes, particularly in a capstone class. We've used it in the philanthropic studies capstone. Every student does a digital story at the end in order to answer whatever prompt it is that you might put forth. What's the public purposes of economics? What's the public purposes of journalism? So that these tools are very adaptable, and these tools are very accessible to you. And the rest of this is really information more about the different CMG tools, the scale, and the different domains. I will say, without going any further due to time, I was contacted by a person who's working with, I'll say, a prestigious Northeastern university. I'll just leave it at that, recently. She contacted me and she said, the one thing that she'd been doing quite a search for information on civic learning outcomes. And she said, the one thing that I'm most impressed with about the CMG is that it's not just a scale, that you have these other kinds of measures that can be brought to bear, and that they seem very adaptable. And so I was pleased to know that after doing a review that that's where she has landed. She said, now, do you have any idea what kind of resources a campus would need if they were to adapt CMG into their office, into their unit, into their programming? And I said, I really don't. And she said, well, you need to figure that out because it's a good set of tools and people need to better understand how they can actually use it. One of the best things for us, and I'll conclude with this, is research results is, I'd say the overall implication of CMG as our North Star is that it's worked itself into the language, into the identity of our campus, so that it becomes, if you're on our campus or if you see our strategic plan, it'll talk now about civic-minded graduates. If you see posters up, there's these posters about civic-minded graduates, and it's like students see this from the application, from scholarship applications all through to graduation. We have the Plater Medallion that gives recognition to students upon graduation, and they each write a narrative for that medallion that responds to a prompt and is used, the civic-minded graduate rubric, to evaluate these. So that's what I guess I'd leave you with. I don't know what your North Star will become or is, and you might know this already. But whatever that North Star is, it's not only important to research, it's not only important to course design, but it's important to campus culture so that students who are coming here from the get-go in those early freshman classes till graduation, till they see their work, till they understand their faculty, that concept of civic-mindedness or civic virtue sort of permeate throughout the campus. And certainly you have the assets to pull it off, and you have the collective action of many that I'm quite confident that you'll do great things with this grant and beyond. So thank you very much.